Mike Callahan's breath frosted in the crisp Montana dawn as he followed hoof prints across the frosted grass. His prized Hereford bull had broken through the north fence again, and with temperatures dropping below freezing, finding the stubborn animal quickly was essential. Pushing through a stand of pines, Mike paused, head tilted. A low hum vibrated through the soles of his boots, so subtle he almost mistook it for distant farm equipment. "What the hell?" he muttered, the strange sensation growing stronger with each step toward the old ridge. A barren stretch local farmers called the dead zone due to its inability to support crops despite numerous soil treatments. The humming intensified, pulsing now in rhythm with his heartbeat. Mike reached for his phone, instinctively wanting to document whatever unusual geological event was occurring. His family had worked this land for 3 generations, and nothing like this had ever. The ground lurched beneath him. Mike stumbled backward as a spider web of blue-white energy crackled across the soil surface, vaporizing the morning frost in expanding circles. The dead soil began to glow and split, earth heaving upward as something massive pushed from below. His phone screen flickered with interference, but he kept recording as a section of ridge nearly 50 yards wide rose up, shedding decades of accumulated soil and vegetation. "Jesus Christ," he whispered, backing away but unable to tear his eyes from the spectacle. The object emerging from the earth wasn't rock. Its surface gleamed with a metallic sheen unlike any alloy Mike had ever seen, with patterns that seemed to shift and flow like liquid despite its solid structure. Most disturbing were the lights now blinking to life across its revealed surface. Methodical, purposeful, in sequences too precise to be natural phenomena. His light stream to the family group chat exploded with notifications, but Mike couldn't look away long enough to check the messages. As more of the object revealed itself, he recognized unmistakable design elements. Geometric ports, what appeared to be damaged propulsion systems, and a crumpled section that could only be a hull breach. This wasn't a natural formation or secret military installation. It was a ship, and it wasn't from Earth. Dr. Elena Kowalski was halfway through her morning lecture at MIT when her presentation was interrupted by a security team. The xenotechnology specialist barely had time to grab her laptop before being escorted to a waiting helicopter, her bewildered students watching through the windows as it lifted off from the campus squad. "You've been activated under National Security Directive 7. The stone-faced agent across from her explained over the roar of rotors. "Something's been found in Montana. Something that matches theoretical designs from your papers." Elena's pulse quickened. "Which papers?" The agent handed her a tablet displaying a classified briefing document. The image on screen, a blurry frame capture from a civilian social media livestream, showed a partially uncovered structure with distinctive honeycomb-patterned hull material and non-standard geometrical access ports. "Oh my God," she breathed. "It's real." For 15 years, Elena had been publishing increasingly detailed analyses of what extraterrestrial technology might look like based on optimal engineering principles. Her latest quantum processor designs had been dismissed by colleagues as too theoretical, impossible to manufacture with current technology. Yet here was something emerging from the Earth with surface structures nearly identical to her speculative models. The object began emitting energy signatures 90 minutes ago. The agent continued. "It's growing stronger. 4 nearby towns have been evacuated as a precaution, and we've established a 10-mile exclusion zone." "How long has it been there?" "Initial ground-penetrating radar suggests at least 50 years, possibly longer. It appears to have been deliberately buried." Elena stared at the image, mind racing through implications. "And it's activating now." "Why?" The agent's expression remained neutral. "That's what you're being brought in to determine, Doctor." By the time Elena's helicopter approached the site 12 hours later, the scene below had transformed into a massive military operation. Floodlights illuminated a perimeter of hastily erected barriers surrounding the half-emerged craft, which now rose nearly 7 stories above the broken earth. Teams in hazmat suits collected samples while defense systems tracked every movement around the site. As they landed at the forward operating base, Alina noticed Mike Callahan being interviewed by military personnel, his phone and other devices confiscated after his footage had gone viral despite government attempts to contain it. She made a mental note to speak with him. First witnesses often noticed details that became overlooked in subsequent documentation. Dr. Kowalski. A tall colonel approached as she disembarked. "I'm Colonel Reeves. Welcome to Operation Disclosure. We've set up your requested equipment in the main analysis tent." "I need to see it up close," Alina said, eyes fixed on the massive craft. "Not possible yet. We're still establishing safety protocols for." A sudden pulse of energy from the ship cut him off, washing over the base in a wave that temporarily disabled every electronic device before systems restarted themselves. In that brief moment of darkness, something new appeared on the ship's hull, illuminated symbols flowing across its surface like digital blood through alien veins. "It's communicating," Alina whispered, recognizing patterns similar to mathematical sequences. "Or it's calling for help." Alina's hands trembled slightly as she examined the first recovered fragment under the specialized containment field. 3 days into the investigation, and this was her first direct contact with the alien material, a palm-sized component with geometric patterns that shifted subtly under different light wavelengths. "The structure is remarkably similar to the quantum processor architecture I proposed last year," she murmured to her assistant, who dutifully recorded her observations. "The circuitry layout matches my designs at approximately 87% correlation." "Quite a coincidence," Colonel Reeves remarked from behind her. Alina frowned. "In statistical terms, this level of correlation isn't coincidence. It's either causation or I somehow derived my designs from this technology without knowing it." She set down her instruments, unsettled by the implications. "I need to see my research timeline mapped against local geological data and atmospheric anomalies." Within hours, Alina stared at the resulting projection with growing disbelief. Each of her major research breakthroughs corresponded with subtle energy spikes emanating from this region, spikes so minor they'd been dismissed as background radiation or equipment glitches over the decades. "It was broadcasting," she whispered, "sending out patterns on frequencies that affect neural activity during sleep cycles." She turned to Reeves. "Who else lived within 50 miles of this crash site over the past 50 years? The personnel files revealed a disturbing pattern. The area had produced an unusually high number of technological innovators across multiple fields. The pioneer of carbon nanotech batteries had grown up just 20 miles away. The developer of bioregenerative plastics had spent summers at a nearby ranch. All their innovations shared subtle characteristics with recovered alien components. "We weren't inventing," Alina concluded, her voice hollow. "We were remembering." Mike Callahan sat in the sterile interrogation room, rolling a paper cup between his palms as he had for the past hour. Despite assurances that he wasn't under arrest, the armed guards and repeated questioning suggested otherwise. The door opened, and to his surprise, Dr. Kowalski entered instead of another stone-faced agent. "Mr. Callahan, I'm Alina Kowalski." She sat across from him without offering a handshake. "I need to ask you something that will sound strange. Have you experienced any unusual dreams over the years? Patterns, equations, designs that seem to come from nowhere?" Mike stiffened. "How did you know about that?" "The ship has been influencing people within its proximity, especially during REM sleep when the brain is most receptive to external stimuli." "Those weren't just dreams," Mike said quietly. "I built things from them. Little inventions. Never thought much of it. Just considered myself handy." He hesitated. "My grandfather was the same way. Could fix anything. Design improvements no one else thought of." Alina leaned forward. "Your family has lived here. How long?" "Since before the crash, if that's what you're asking. My grandfather bought the land in '68. Alina placed a tablet before him displaying a molecular scan. "This is your blood sample taken during initial containment protocols. See these markers?" She pointed to highlighted segments. "They're not fully human." Mike's face drained of color. What are you saying? I'm saying whoever crashed that ship didn't all leave afterward. Later that afternoon, Elena guided a reluctant Mike through the restricted laboratory sections where recovered technology was being studied. Most pieces resisted all attempts at activation, responding only to specialized energy frequencies that mimicked the ship's core emissions. Watch, she instructed, connecting a recovered fragment to the testing apparatus. The component remained inert despite increasing power levels. Now you try. Mike hesitantly placed his hand on the designated interface. The alien technology immediately illuminated, interfaces appearing in three-dimensional projections above its surface. Just as I suspected, Elena whispered. The technology responds to your genetic signature. Before Mike could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. Colonel Reeves burst into the lab. The ship's core just went into overdrive. It's transmitting something into deep space. Elena rushed to the monitoring station, pulling up real-time data from the site. It's a directional signal, incredibly powerful and focused. The ship was never trying to communicate with us. It was calling home. She turned to the wall-mounted screens displaying orbital telemetry as technicians rushed to recalibrate tracking systems. Activate deep space monitoring. Whatever's receiving that signal will be responding. Within 20 minutes, the facility plunged into controlled chaos as confirmation arrived from 3 separate observatories. Multiple objects had suddenly appeared at the edge of the solar system, their trajectories clearly indicating Earth as their destination. How is that possible? Reeves demanded. Nothing can travel that fast. Nothing we know, Elena corrected grimly. Initiate worldwide alert protocols. We're about to have visitors, and given how badly they want this ship back after half a century, I doubt they're coming to welcome us to the galactic community. Mike stared at the alien component still glowing beneath his touch. Why does it recognize me? What happened to my family? Elena met his gaze directly. I think some of the crew survived the crash. And I think they did more than influence our dreams. They integrated themselves into the local population. The question is whether they were running from something or preparing for something. On the monitor, the approaching vessels accelerated to impossible speeds. I guess we're about to find out, Mike said quietly. The world watched in collective apprehension as the alien vessels decelerated into Earth orbit with impossible precision, their massive forms eclipsing satellite feeds as they positioned themselves in a perfect triangular formation. No nation's attempts at communication received any response for the first 17 hours of their arrival. In the hastily established command center beneath the Pentagon, Elena stood among military leaders and government officials as screens displayed the smaller craft now deploying from the motherships. The vessels, each roughly the size of a naval destroyer, descended in formation, creating a hovering perimeter around the Montana crash site. They're establishing a containment grid, General Hargrove observed, his weathered face illuminated by tactical displays. Classic quarantine protocol. Or preparing for extraction, Elena countered. They're positioning for resource recovery, not attack. The largest screen suddenly flickered, satellite feeds replaced by a transmission originating from the lead vessel. The being that appeared possessed humanoid features distorted by evolutionary divergence, elongated limbs, an enlarged cranium, and eyes with rectangular pupils adapted for different light spectra. It wore what appeared to be ceremonial garments denoting rank. I am High Curator Excentorax of the Archivists, the alien announced in flawless English, its voice resonating with artificial perfection. Your species has inadvertently activated stolen property containing classified technology. Surrender the collection vessel and all derived innovations immediately, or we will retrieve it regardless of collateral damage. Elena studied the being's features, noting the precise way it formed human words, as if it had been studying Earth languages for decades rather than hours. They've been monitoring us, she whispered to the president's science advisor, probably since the crash. You have 72 hours to comply, Centorax continued. Any attempt to remove or further examine archivist property will trigger immediate collection protocols. The transmission ended abruptly. The room erupted in debate, military voices arguing for defensive positioning while diplomatic channels advocated for negotiation. Through the chaos, Alina noticed Mike Callahan standing silently by the door, his presence at this highest-level briefing unusual but unchallenged. "Why are you here?" she asked quietly, moving to his side. "They requested me specifically," he replied, nodding toward the Joint Chiefs. "Said if the technology responds to me, I might be our best source of information." 2 hours later, Elena and Mike stood inside the partially excavated ship, surrounded by a team of specialists frantically working to decode its systems before the deadline expired. The interior architecture defied human design principles: curved surfaces flowing into unexpected angles, control interfaces that appeared to shift configuration based on the observer's position. "I've made progress with the log entries," Elena announced, pointing to translated sequences on her specialized tablet. "But something's not adding up. According to these records, this wasn't a crash. It was a deliberate landing. And the ship classification doesn't match what Centaurex claimed." "What do you mean?" Mike asked, running his fingers along a wall panel that illuminated at his touch. He called it a collection vessel containing classified technology. But these logs identify it as a preservation arc, and there's repeated reference to something called the Descent. Mike's hand triggered a previously hidden interface, revealing a compartment containing what appeared to be data storage devices. "What's this?" Alina carefully extracted one, connecting it to their translation system. As information flowed across the screens, her expression shifted from concentration to shock. "This isn't a weapons platform or military vessel," she breathed. "It's a cultural repository. These are historical records, biological samples, art, music, the complete heritage of their civilization." She looked up at Mike, understanding dawning. "The archivists aren't coming to recover dangerous technology. They're coming to erase evidence of their past." "Why would they do that?" Alina scrolled through more translated files. According to this, the archivist civilization underwent radical transformation 3 centuries ago. They began eliminating biological diversity in favor of technological homogeneity, essentially erasing their own evolutionary history to pursue a singular optimal form. She pointed to images showing the progressive modification of the archivist species, each generation more uniform than the last, individuality gradually engineered away. "Not everyone agreed with this direction," she continued. "A faction called the Preservationists stole this vessel and escaped with the cultural and biological records the mainstream society was systematically erasing. They didn't just crash here by accident. They chose Earth specifically." "Why Earth?" "Because we reminded them of themselves before they changed." Elena's voice grew quiet. "They saw in humans the diversity, creativity, and unpredictability their own species was sacrificing for efficiency." The facility's alarms suddenly blared as satellite feeds showed the archivist vessels shifting position, energy signatures building within their propulsion systems. "They're not waiting for the deadline," Mike realized. "They know we found something." Elena gathered the data cores. "We need to broadcast this. Let humanity know what they're really after. The archivists aren't coming to protect us from dangerous technology. They're coming to erase the evidence of what they used to be." "Hold still," Elena instructed as she calibrated the neural interface. The makeshift laboratory within the military compound hummed with activity as technicians prepared for what might be humanity's last hope for understanding the archivist technology before the impending confrontation. Mike sat rigidly in the scanning chair, electrodes attached to his temples. "You really think this will work? Your genetic markers give you unprecedented access to their systems," Elena replied, checking readings on her tablet. "We need to understand why." The interface activated, bathing Mike in soft blue light as the system mapped his neural patterns. On surrounding screens, alien code scrolled rapidly, the ship's systems responding to his presence even from kilometers away. "Extraordinary," Elena whispered. "The technology isn't just recognizing you, it's adapting to you." Military observers shifted nervously as the connection strengthened. General Hargrove stepped forward. "Can we weaponize this? Use their own technology against them?" Elena shot him a withering look. That's exactly the kind of thinking that created this situation. The archivists turned their entire civilization into a weapon of perfect efficiency. We need to understand, not escalate. The neural mapping suddenly accelerated, displays filling with information faster than the translation systems could process. Mike gasped, his back arching as images flooded his consciousness. Not just data, but memories. "I can see them," he said, voice distant. "The crew who landed here. They were escaping, running from their own people." His eyes moved rapidly behind closed lids. They knew they would be followed eventually. They were preparing. Preparing for what? Elena urged. For integration. Mike's eyes snapped open, clarity dawning. My grandfather wasn't just near the crash site. He found them, helped them. They were dying from injuries, couldn't survive in their original forms. His voice broke. The crew transferred their consciousness, their genetic material. They didn't just hide among humans. They became human. Elena's scientific mind raced through implications. A deliberate evolutionary adaptation. They chose to integrate rather than remain separate. But why would advanced beings choose to become human? Hargrove demanded. Because they were being erased, Elena realized. Their civilization was systematically removing biological diversity, individual thought. Everything that made them unique. Becoming human wasn't a fallback. It was a preservation strategy. Mike disconnected the electrodes with shaking hands. My grandmother used to say my grandfather changed after his accident in the hills. Started inventing things, having vivid dreams. He looked up at Elena. I'm not just influenced by their technology. I'm their descendant. In the secure command center, satellite feeds showed archivist vessels deploying advanced scanning technology over major technology centers worldwide, prioritizing research facilities that had developed innovations paralleling their own systems. They're mapping our technological evolution, Elena explained to assembled leaders, identifying which human innovations derived from their crashed vessels' influence. Can we shield these facilities? The president asked. Their scanning technology penetrates any shielding we have, Hargrove replied grimly. And our latest intelligence suggests they're preparing extraction teams, not just for their vessel, but for derived technologies. Elena studied the deployment patterns. They're prioritizing quantum computing centers, advanced materials research, neural interface systems. She froze, a pattern emerging. Wait, these aren't military applications. They're focusing on technologies that support individuality, creativity, and biological integration. Meaning what? The president demanded. Meaning the renegades didn't just hide their past here. They seeded a competitive future. Elena turned to Mike. The technologies influenced by the ship all enhance human capabilities rather than replace them. They're the exact opposite of the archivist approach. Mike nodded slowly. They were creating a counterargument, proof that biological and technological evolution could coexist without one consuming the other. Warning klaxons interrupted as feeds showed smaller archivist craft breaking formation, descending toward major research facilities. They're moving, Hargrove barked. Commencing defensive operations. Wait, Elena called out. Conventional weapons will be useless. We need to try something else. She turned to Mike. The ship responds to you, to your hybrid neural patterns. If the renegades designed their systems to work with human cognition, then they built in a backdoor, Mike finished. A way for humans to control the technology when the archivists returned. Elena nodded toward the neural interface. We need to connect you directly to the ship's core systems, not just to understand it, to operate it. Is that even possible? The renegades made their choice 50 years ago, when they integrated with humanity, Elena said quietly. They weren't just hiding. They were creating something new, a bridge between our species. It's time to cross it. Project Symphony is now active. Alina announced to the assembled Joint Task Force as technicians made final adjustments to the massive array of neural interfaces. Around her, dozens of people, all from regions influenced by the crashed ship, prepared to link their minds collectively to the alien systems. Mike sat at the center node, his hybrid biology making him the natural focal point for the unprecedented experiment. His expression betrayed the weight of responsibility as medical staff attached advanced monitoring equipment to track his vital signs. "This could kill you," Alina reminded him quietly. "The neural load is beyond anything we tested. And if we do nothing, the archivists will strip our planet of every technology that threatens their vision of progress," Mike replied, determination hardening his features. "My grandfather didn't integrate with the crew just to have their legacy erased." General Hargrove paced behind the operations team. "We need offensive capabilities first. Their ships have already breached airspace over research facilities in California, Germany, and Japan." "That's not how this works," Alina countered. "The technology wasn't designed as a weapon. Forcing it to become one would be like trying to turn a library into a missile. You destroy what makes it valuable in the first place." The countdown reached 0, and Mike gasped as the neural link activated, connecting him to both the ship and the minds of the other participants. Data streamed through his consciousness, not as code or language, but as intuitive concepts, emotional imprints left by the original crew. "I can feel them," he whispered. "Their intentions, their hopes for what we might become." On the monitors, the ship's systems began activating in sequences never before observed, dormant systems coming online after decades of silence. The archivist vessels in orbit immediately altered their scanning patterns, focusing intense beams on the excavation site. "They've noticed," Hargrove warned. "Whatever you're doing, do it faster." Through the neural network, Mike directed the participants' collective consciousness, finding pathways through alien systems that individual minds could never navigate alone. The technology responded differently to human thought patterns, not with the precise, predictable responses the archivists expected, but with creative adaptations that evolved with each interaction. "It's working," Alina breathed, watching as the ship's interfaces transformed. "The technology is learning from us as much as we're learning from it." In Mike's mind, understanding dawned like a sunrise. The renegades knew their people had lost something essential: the capacity for unpredictable innovation. They designed these systems to evolve through human interaction, to create applications their own people couldn't imagine. Military observers murmured in amazement as the technology began generating solutions to containment and defense that had never appeared in their simulations: adaptive shields that anticipated attack patterns, communication systems that constantly shifted frequencies to avoid interception. "This isn't just about defending Earth," Mike continued, his voice stronger now despite the strain evident on his face. "It's about proving a point to the archivists, showing them what they've lost in their pursuit of perfect efficiency." Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the facility. Satellite feeds showed archivist collection teams breaking through the outer perimeter defenses, their advanced technology easily overwhelming conventional military responses. "We're out of time," Hargrove announced. "If you can't weaponize that ship in the next 10 minutes, we're implementing the nuclear containment protocol." "You can't nuke the site," Alina protested. "The ship's core would release enough energy to create an extinction-level event." Through the neural link, Mike sensed something new: a hidden chamber within the ship that had remained sealed even to their probes. As the collective consciousness of Project Symphony focused on this discovery, ancient safeguards recognized the hybrid neural patterns and granted access. "There's something else," Mike announced, his voice distant as his consciousness expanded through the ship's systems. "A genetic repository, the original archivist biological forms, preserved before their civilization began its transformation." The chamber revealed itself on the facility's screens, thousands of genetic samples stored in cryogenic suspension, along with detailed records of archivist biological development. "This is what Xen Thorax fears most," Alina realized. Not our weapons, but evidence of what they deliberately left behind. Proof that they chose efficiency over diversity. As Archivist forces advanced toward the compound, Mike's expression shifted from strain to sudden clarity. The ship wasn't just hiding their past, he said. It was safeguarding their future. And now I know how to use it. The neural network pulsed with new purpose as Mike directed the collective consciousness toward the ship's communication array, not to fight the Archivists, but to show them something far more dangerous than any weapon: the path not taken. The first Archivist recovery team breached the outer defense perimeter at dawn, their sleek exosuits rendering conventional weapons useless. They moved with mechanical precision, each unit perfectly coordinated with the others, executing textbook containment protocols without deviation. What they hadn't anticipated was Mike Callahan standing alone at the edge of the excavation site, wearing nothing more sophisticated than jeans and a flannel shirt. "That's far enough," he called out, his voice steady despite facing beings whose technology could reduce him to atoms with a thought. Behind him, the partially uncovered ship hummed with energy, its systems fully awakened for the first time in 50 years. The lead Archivist paused, rectangular pupils contracting as it analyzed this unexpected development. "Human," it stated, voice modulated through translation systems, "you will step aside. This technology is not yours to command." Mike smiled. "That's where you're wrong. It was specifically designed for us to command." He raised his hand, and the ship responded instantly. Panels shifted across its surface, energy barriers materializing between the Archivists and their objective. The recovery team deployed countermeasures, cutting beams that should have sliced through any known defense, only to watch them scatter against barriers that adapted to each attack, learning and evolving with each engagement. In the command center half a mile away, Alina monitored neural activity as Project Symphony participants maintained their connection to Mike and the ship. "It's working," she breathed. "The hybrid interface is generating defensive patterns the Archivists can't predict." Military observers watched in astonishment as the recovery team's methodical approach faltered against defenses that seemed to anticipate their every move. For the first time, the perfect coordination of the Archivists became a weakness, their predictable, optimal strategies rendered ineffective against systems that evolved chaotically. "The ship isn't just defending itself," Alina explained. "It's learning from human neural patterns, incorporating creativity, intuition, even emotional responses into its defensive systems." On the main screen, satellite feeds showed High Curator Xanthorax's vessel moving into position above the site, weapons systems charging for an orbital strike that would obliterate everything within a 10-mile radius. "They're going to destroy what they can't recover," General Hargrove realized, initiating evacuation protocols. "Wait," Elena interrupted, watching data streams from the neural network. "Mike is doing something else." At the excavation site, Mike stood unwavering as the ship's communication array activated, bypassing conventional channels to transmit directly to the Archivist fleet. But instead of words or data, it sent something the Archivists had purged from their civilization centuries ago: raw, unfiltered human experiences. The hybrid neural network channeled the emotions, memories, and creative impulses of every participant, broadcasting the chaotic beauty of human consciousness. "What have you done?" the lead Archivist demanded, its exosuit systems flickering as unexpected code infiltrated its perfectly ordered systems. "Reminded you of what you used to be," Mike answered. In orbit, Xanthorax's vessel froze mid-attack sequence, its systems paralyzed by the influx of patterns that defied logical processing. The High Curator experienced something beyond his comprehension: the unpredictable cascade of human emotion, the inefficient but powerful connectivity of minds that valued diversity over perfection. "This transmission contains programming anomalies," he announced to his subordinates. "Purge all systems immediately." But the transmission wasn't a conventional attack. The renegade crew had spent decades integrating with humanity, learning how consciousness flowed between biological and technological systems. The code they'd hidden within the ship couldn't be purged because it wasn't code at all. It was the essence of what the archivists had once been, a mirror reflecting their abandoned heritage. In the command center, Elena watched as archivist systems worldwide began exhibiting unprecedented behaviors, adapting, experimenting, evolving beyond their programming. "It's beautiful," she whispered, watching patterns resolve on monitoring screens. The technology is remembering how to integrate with biological systems rather than replace them. A new transmission cut through all channels as another archivist appeared on screen. Not Xentorax, but someone whose features appeared subtly different, less uniform, with eyes that held something the High Curators lacked. "I am Sub-Curator Velmeric," it announced. "What you have shown us requires further examination. Our protocols for technological recovery may be incomplete." For the first time in centuries, an archivist had spoken without perfect certainty, had acknowledged the possibility of imperfection in their approach. Mike sensed the change through the neural network, feeling the rigid structure of archivist, thought patterns beginning to fracture, possibilities multiplying where once only linear optimization existed. "They're listening," he told Elena through their connection. For the first time in generations, they're actually listening. In orbit, Xentorax's vessel powered down its weapons, the immediate threat averted. But the real battle for the future of both species was only beginning. The orbital meeting chamber, hastily constructed from modular space station components, floated in neutral territory between Earth and the archivist fleet. Inside, representatives from both species faced each other across a table designed to accommodate vastly different physiologies. Elena observed the proceedings with scientific fascination. On one side sat human delegates, military leaders, scientists, and government officials, still processing the revelation that humanity had been quietly influenced by alien technology for generations. On the other side sat the archivists, their uniformly enhanced bodies betraying little emotion, yet radiating barely contained disruption. In the center position opposite High Curator Xentorax sat Mike Callahan, no longer just a Montana rancher, but the living bridge between species. "Your transmission has caused unprecedented system instabilities throughout our fleet," Xentorax stated, the perfectly modulated voice containing something new, a subtle inflection that hinted at uncertainty. 117 vessels have reported cognitive architecture anomalies. "We call those anomalies independent thought," Mike replied. "Your ancestors valued them enough to preserve them here when your society began eliminating them." Sub-Curator Velmeric stepped forward, their form noticeably less enhanced than Xentorax's. "We request direct evidence of these hybrid capabilities you claim. Theoretical models suggest such integration should be impossible." Elena nodded to 5 individuals who had been waiting silently at the chamber's perimeter. They joined Mike at the table, each bearing subtle but distinctive non-human features, slightly elongated fingers, unusual eye coloration, cranial proportions that deviated from human norms. "The genetics committee confirmed their hybrid status yesterday," Elena explained. "Each is descended from the original crew members who integrated with local populations. All possess enhanced cognitive abilities while maintaining the creativity and emotional intelligence characteristic of humans." "Impossible," Xentorax insisted. "Such integration would produce unstable, inefficient neural architecture." "That's exactly the point," Mike countered. "The inefficiency is what makes it powerful. Human creativity emerges from the spaces between logical pathways, from connections your optimization programs would eliminate as redundant." To demonstrate, Elena activated the chamber's holographic display. Neural mapping of standard archivist cognition appeared alongside hybrid brain activity, the former showing perfect, streamlined efficiency, while the latter displayed chaotic but incredibly rich interconnections. "Your ancestors understood what your society was losing," Elena explained. "They saw humanity as a preservation medium, a species similar enough to integrate with but different enough to maintain the aspects of consciousness your civilization was systematically removing." Velmarek studied the neural patterns with visible fascination. These connections generate solutions our predictive models fail to anticipate during the containment operation. Because they didn't follow optimal pathways, Mike confirmed. Humans often discover breakthrough innovations by accident, through error, or by connecting seemingly unrelated concepts. On Earth below, tensions escalated as humanity processed this new reality. News of hybrids living among the population for generations triggered predictable reactions: fear, anger, conspiracy theories. Governments struggled to control the narrative as religious leaders, scientists, and political figures offered conflicting interpretations. Military satellites tracked the archivist fleet splitting into two distinct formations, Kazenthorax's loyalists maintaining aggressive posture, while Velmarek's faction adopted defensive positioning between Earth and the potential aggressors. "Your civilization stands at a critical juncture," Kazenthorax stated. "Our analysis indicates 17 major nations are preparing offensive measures against confirmed hybrid populations. You claim integration benefits both species, yet your own kind does not appear to share this assessment." Alina exchanged concerned glances with the human delegates. Reports from Earth confirmed growing unrest, protests outside research facilities, demands for genetic testing, historical revisionists claiming all major human achievements must have been alien-influenced. "We're afraid of what we don't understand," Mike acknowledged, "just as your society feared the unpredictability of biological evolution. But fear doesn't justify erasing diversity." The Chamber's communications array suddenly activated as a priority transmission from Montana appeared, satellite imagery showing crowds gathering at the excavation site, some protesting, others forming protective human chains around the research facilities. "Your species claims to value individual choice," Kazenthorax observed. "Yet when faced with evidence of our integration, many demand conformity through expulsion or elimination of difference. Precisely the path our civilization followed to our current state." Mike stood, addressing both delegations with newfound authority. "Then perhaps both our species need to remember what the renegades risked everything to preserve. That true advancement comes not from perfecting a single approach, but from the chaotic, messy collaboration of different perspectives." As if in response, the excavated ship beneath Montana suddenly activated new systems, sending a signal that bypassed all communication protocols and reached every human and archivist mind simultaneously. The unaltered historical record of a civilization that had once celebrated the very diversity it now feared. The signal released from the ancient ship rippled outward, touching every human mind on Earth and every archivist consciousness in the fleet simultaneously. Unlike conventional communication, this transmission bypassed language entirely, delivering not just information, but experience, memory, and emotion preserved by the renegade crew half a century earlier. Humans worldwide paused mid-action as the first unfiltered contact with alien consciousness flowed through them. They experienced the archivists' evolutionary journey, from a species much like humanity, filled with vibrant diversity and chaotic innovation, to their gradual transformation into beings of perfect efficiency but diminished creativity. They felt the renegade's grief as art forms disappeared, as biological differences were engineered away for optimization, as the messy brilliance that had once defined their civilization faded into perfect, sterile uniformity. In the orbital chamber, Alina watched tears stream down the faces of human delegates. More shocking were the reactions from the archivists, beings who had supposedly transcended emotion now experiencing centuries of suppressed feeling, resurging through neural pathways they'd attempted to optimize away. "This is what they preserved," Mike said quietly. "Not just genetic samples or cultural artifacts, but the lived experience of what was lost." Across Earth, something extraordinary began happening at research facilities where hybrid-influenced technology had been developed. Dormant systems previously undetected by human or archivist scans activated in sync, creating a planetary network powered by the neural patterns of millions of humans going about their daily lives. A vast, chaotic cognitive engine that no purely logical system could replicate or predict. In low orbit, defensive platforms materialize from the seemingly random signal patterns, creating a protective field not just around military targets but cultural centers, natural wonders, and sites of unique biodiversity. "What's happening?" General Hargrove demanded, staring at sensor readings that showed technology beyond anything Earth or the archivists possessed. The final failsafe, Elena realized. The renegades didn't just hide their past here. They built a way to protect Earth's future, a defensive system powered by human consciousness itself. On the main viewing screen, Xentorax's loyalist vessels launched their attack, energy weapons discharging against the newly formed shield. Instead of collapsing, the barrier absorbed each strike, learning, adapting, becoming stronger with each attempted breach. "Impossible," Xentorax stated, all pretense of calm shattered. "No defense can anticipate every attack vector simultaneously." "That's exactly what human consciousness does," Mike replied. "We don't calculate every possibility. We intuit, we feel, we imagine. The unpredictability you eliminated from your species is precisely what makes this defense work." The ship beneath Montana fully emerged from the Earth now, not as a vessel meant for space travel, but transforming into a vast, ground-based installation. Its original purpose finally revealed, not a lifeboat or weapon, but a seed from which a new kind of civilization could grow. In a desperate final gambit, Xentorax lunged forward, physically grasping Mike's arm, initiating direct neural contact that bypassed all technological interfaces. For the first time in centuries, an archivist experienced unfiltered human consciousness directly. The chamber fell silent as the High Curator froze, rectangular pupils dilating in shock as Mike's hybrid mind shared not just information, but the full emotional spectrum of human experience. The inefficient beauty of love, the creative power of hope, the driving force of righteous anger, the humbling wisdom of acknowledged error. When Xentorax finally released Mike and stepped back, something had fundamentally changed. The perfect posture faltered. The voice, when it finally came, contained something the archivists had engineered away generations ago: humility. "We were wrong," the High Curator said quietly. "The renegades were right to preserve what we discarded." 1 year later, the Montana installation, now called Integration City, hummed with activity as humans and archivists worked side by side. The genetic repository had been carefully used to restore diversity to the archivist population, while human scientists collaborated with their counterparts to develop technologies that enhanced rather than replaced biological systems. Mike stood with Elena on a ridge overlooking the complex, watching children, some human, some archivist, some hybrid, playing together in a newly established school. They succeeded beyond anything they could have imagined, Elena said, nodding toward a memorial to the renegade crew who had sacrificed everything to create this possibility. "They understood something fundamental," Mike replied. "That evolution isn't about finding the perfect form and freezing it for all time. It's about constant adaptation, diversity, the freedom to become something unexpected." Below them, the partially dismantled ship that had once seemed destroyed beyond recovery now formed the foundation of something neither species could have built alone. Proof that sometimes, leaving something broken in the right place is the first step toward building something far greater than its original design ever allowed.